Why do intellectual professionals make terrible entrepreneurs? Dangerous not in the way of harmful to others, but being the type of person that can't be harmed, person that can't be messed with. Now, if you're an intellectual professional watching this, you might be very triggered by what I just said. You are probably thinking, no, I can become a great entrepreneur. But if you actually really observe, you'll find that most intellectual professionals will choose the safety of a job over an entrepreneurial adventure. But the question is, the same skills that make somebody a fantastic intellectual professional, is it possible perhaps that the same way of thinking is not conducive to becoming a successful entrepreneur? You need to understand that over the last 8 years, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of professionals, people who are not really inspired by their work, have a creative idea, and have approached our services to become an entrepreneur. And I have observed some tendencies in them which now I can very confidently talk about. And again, this is not really about criticizing them, but if you're going to solve a problem, I think it's helpful to try and understand the problem first. So the question is, do intellectual professionals make terrible entrepreneurs? And I think the answer is quite possibly yes. And in this video, I want to discuss the number of ways that intellectual professionals sabotage their entrepreneurial potential. The first thing that I have identified through my own observations is that intellectual professionals are incredibly risk averse. They don't lean into risk, they lean away from risk. And as we know, being a successful entrepreneur is all about leaning into and embracing risk. Of course, the fact is that as an entrepreneur, you need to understand risk, you need to mitigate risk, but first you have to take that risk. So you've got to have the willingness to understand that in order for you to have the opportunity to become a successful entrepreneur, you're going to have to take the risk, meaning that you have to lean into the unknown, the uncertain. And I do find that largely intellectual professionals are risk averse and are afraid of trying something new unless they already have evidence of it working. And so that means that that risk aversion generally means that they don't lean into entrepreneurship with enthusiasm, and even when they do it with a lot of fear, which is a negative energy. The second thing that I have found, having worked with a lot of intellectual professionals, is that they have a tendency to preempt. That basically means they try and measure things that haven't even happened yet. They worry about the next 10 things before even taking the first step. And this unfortunately sabotages their ability to take decisive action. They're already wondering, well, what if I do this, then what's going to happen here? But how am I going to do this? But what if those people say this? What if my boss finds out? And so they're already in this what if mode. And what happens is they end up sabotaging themselves. They end up scaring themselves out of doing anything because they're already preempting. And one of the things that we have found with entrepreneurs is that the people who tend to have a probability of becoming successful as an entrepreneur is that they take the first step, and once they have taken the first steps, then they take the second step, and one step at a time, and they try not to preempt too many things because a lot of things you can't figure out without doing. And so the intellectual will typically try and work everything out in their head instead of out there in the marketplace. The third tendency that I have seen in intellectual professionals is a tendency to overthink and underact. Well, as an entrepreneur, you actually need to take more action and think a little bit less. It's not to say that you shouldn't think, you do need to think, but a lot of the times you think after you've taken action. You've got to learn by doing, not by thinking. A lot of evidence and a lot of things will only become evident once you have made an error, and it's through constant course corrections that you become a successful entrepreneur. But the problem is when you're an intellectual professional, you tend to work everything out in your head, and so you overthink, and sometimes analysis paralysis ends up happening to intellectual professionals, and they keep aiming and they keep aiming, but they never pull the trigger. And so that is a problem, because in entrepreneurship you have to make a lot of decisions, and sometimes you're not going to have all the data and you're not going to have all the knowledge, and it's only after you make the decision you start to get an understanding of what's working, what isn't working, and then you course correct from there. So if you're not going to take action, you're not going to work things out. If you look at the mindset of an intellectual, they have been programmed to do all the work up here, not in the laboratory of their business. They all do intellectual thinking, and sometimes they have a tendency to overthink and underact. The fourth thing that I think also gets in the way of intellectual professionals becoming successful as entrepreneurs is they tend to, without even realizing, they tend to overemphasize academic achievements in the classroom versus real life achievements out there in the marketplace. And so a lot of them feel a sense of inadequacy, and they try and fulfill that inadequacy by getting more certifications, more diplomas, more degrees, more qualifications, and they feel like they're taking action, but all of their action is in a very safe and contained environment, i.e. the classroom. And they're not prepared to risk anything out there in the marketplace. They're not prepared to risk their reputation. They're not prepared to risk embarrassment, failure, setbacks, and that's what it actually takes. So I do believe that professionals will typically have the tendency to overemphasize academic achievements and underemphasize real life achievements. The fifth thing that I have found, after personally having worked with a lot of intellectual professionals, is that they overvalue procedures and undervalue outcomes. They're all about input. A lot of them are perfectionists. They want to get everything right. They want to have all the details ready. They want to do everything right. Procedures, procedures, procedures. And sometimes they miss the big picture. What is the point of having all the procedures but not having the desirable outcomes? It's a bit like they're efficient, but they're not effective. Efficiency is about doing things well, but effectiveness is doing the right things in the first place. And so they miss the big picture. They're all about, well, it's got to be perfect. Everything has to line up, and my drafts have to be perfect. My proposal has to be perfect. My product has to be perfect. But they don't realize at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, you're measured by the financial results that you bring in and by the lives that you change for your customers. So they completely miss that point, and they tend to get obsessed with procedures, but they completely neglect outcomes. The sixth thing that I have found is they value perfectionism over progress. Every entrepreneur knows that you never achieve perfection. Even look at the largest companies. You go into their forums, you go into their websites, just go and check out their reviews. They'll always get negative reviews, which means that they're constantly improving, continuous improvement. They know they never get there. You look at the first Apple product that came out and you compare it to the product now. Now imagine if Apple was being run by an intellectual professional. They'll probably never launch, because they'll say, we don't have the best product, it's too bulky, our computer's too bulky, it needs to be perfect. So they'll wait and wait and wait and wait. And that's one of the problems that intellectual professionals have, is that they are perfectionists in many cases, not understanding that in entrepreneurship, the way you succeed is through constant progress, not perfectionism. The seventh thing that I have realized after having worked with a lot of intellectual professionals is that they have a need to be recognized for what they know instead of what they do. That's why they probably want to get more and more education, but they don't really judge themselves harshly on non-production of results. So they want to be valued, they want to be recognized, they want to be treated well based on what they know, their knowledge. And they don't understand that in entrepreneurship, it doesn't work like that. Nobody cares what you know. What people care about is, what have you produced? What have you done? And so they tend to get in their head and they overvalue their knowledge. But what is the point of having knowledge if it's not going to be packaged in a way that's going to impact the market? And so entrepreneurs know that, and they tend to be a little bit more pragmatic there in saying, hey, listen, it doesn't matter what I know. What really matters is what I do with what I know. But I find that this way of thinking is largely absent in a lot of intellectual professionals. The eighth thing that I have found in a lot of intellectual professionals, which prevents them from becoming a great entrepreneur, is that they hate rejection. And in business, anytime you're pitching, you're promoting, you're marketing, you're selling, you are faced with the prospect of being rejected. So because intellectual professionals hate being rejected, they don't embrace marketing, they don't embrace selling, they don't embrace promotion, they don't embrace pitching. They avoid those things. And those things are absolutely critical to the success of your business. Sometimes intellectual professionals will start a business and become absolutely obsessed with their product, their service, or their solution, but they won't even think about the customer. And that's why a lot of them fail. You have to be more customer-centric than you are product-centric in order to maximize your chance of becoming a successful entrepreneur. But intellectual professionals become become very microscopic. All their attention is on development and improvement of their product or service. And they hardly think about engaging their market. And they avoid marketing and selling. A lot of them have an aversion to embracing social media marketing, as an example, or email marketing, or making an offer, or doing a webinar or a seminar. They don't want to do these things because there's a real possibility of rejection. Entrepreneurs, it's a fortunate thing that they understand that unless they confront the possibility of rejection, they're not going to get anywhere. But it's unfortunate for the intellectual professionals. They avoid doing all those things that can get them rejected. And as a result, even if they have the best product or service, it doesn't get out in the market and they don't generate great profits from it. And the last thing that I have found, in my observation, having worked with intellectual professionals, that prevents them from becoming great entrepreneurs, is they work a lot on development of their IQ. Data-driven, right? Which is fantastic. Nothing wrong with it. They're data-driven, they're technology-driven as well sometimes. They are very features-oriented when it comes to their products and services. So what happens is they develop their IQ. They have great reasoning skills, analysis skills. But when it comes to the EQ, which is a far superior determinant of entrepreneurial success, they fail miserably. They don't understand their customer. They don't know how to connect with their customer in many cases. They don't know how to relate to their customer. They don't know how to influence their customer. They don't know how to persuade their customer. So they put all of this energy into the development of a solution, but they hardly put any energy into connecting with the marketplace who's actually going to pay them. They have very superior IQs, but EQs are not developed. Self-awareness is generally low compared to the level of IQ that they have. Social awareness is also low in many cases, and they're afraid of people. They don't like being around a lot of people. They don't like mingling with people, shaking hands, going to networking events, and all of this prevents them from being able to build their customer base. Now, look, if you've been watching this and you're triggered by what I've said, put your defenses aside. Stop getting triggered and just tell me, in the comments, tell me what you think about what I said. Now, again, I know that there's always exceptions. Look, there's always going to be exceptions. But here we're talking about the norms. I understand that what I've said doesn't apply to every individual in the world. I get that. But is it generally true? I mean, is that something that you have found within yourself if you're an intellectual professional? On the other hand, if you're an entrepreneur who's tried to employ intellectual professionals in your business, is this what you have found as well? Have you found it to be frustrating having to work with professionals? And very few people would dare to talk about this. But the reason I'm talking about this is not to criticize the intellectual professional, but to give them an insight on how their own mental programming can sometimes prevent them from becoming a successful entrepreneur. Now, just before you go, I just want to mention, I'm on a mission to make people more powerful and dangerous. My tagline for many years has been become powerful. I want you to have the power. But I've added the word dangerous recently, and that's really about not being harmful to people, but dangerous as in terms of somebody that is not easy to mess with. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of people are difficult to mess with? People who are intellectually smart, critical thinkers, emotionally resilient, spiritually strong, financially capable, commercially savvy. And so I am bringing this entire mission and I'm packaging it into an event called Dangerous. I want you to watch this space. I want you to subscribe to my channel. If you are ready to step up and you're sick of the general advice that you've been getting, be nice, be kind, be humble, and it hasn't worked for you, I think you can be all of that as well. But I do think that there is merit in becoming a powerful and a dangerous individual. Watch this space as we're going to talk more and more about how you can become the type of person who is superior in their intellectual, emotional, financial, commercial, and spiritual capabilities. Take care.